Hunter's Claim, The Alliance, Book 1. Written by S. E. Smith. Narrated by David Brenin. Chapter 1. Jessie moved quietly through the deserted streets. The black backpack on her back contained the prize from her outing this night. She had been able to steal enough to keep her and two younger sisters fed for several days, as long as they kept the portions small. She needed to get back to the collapsed rubble that hid the underground parking garage, which was their temporary home. She had found that shelter almost 2 months ago by accident, when she needed a place to hide from the group of men roaming the street. She had crawled under a fallen slab of concrete for protection, only to find it was slanted at an angle. Unable to stop her descent, she had slid to the bottom, where she discovered herself in the remains of a parking garage. After exploring the area, she thought it would be the perfect place for her and her two younger sisters to hide from the roaming gangs who looked for unsuspecting victims to rob or rape. She and her sisters' lives had changed a lot over the last 4 years since the death of their father. Hell, Earth had changed a lot over the past 4 years. Gone was living in a nice house in the suburbs. Gone was making sure her sisters did their homework and got to school on time. She had taken over the job of being mom to her two younger sisters when their mother died shortly after Taylor's 3rd birthday. Everything she knew was gone since that November day 4 years ago, when the skies had filled with spaceships from another world. The president had issued a state of emergency, but it hadn't done any good. People had poured out of their homes in fear. The war, if you could call it that, lasted only a few days. The aliens had weapons that neutralized the nuclear weapons some countries tried to use. Communication systems around the world had been taken over as well. Messages for calm had been transmitted over and over, but it was useless. Even messages from world leaders that the aliens were not there to harm the population did nothing to calm the riots. Zealots and anti-government groups rose up and overpowered the local law enforcement. Jessie, Jordan, and Taylor's dad had been one of the Seattle police officers killed on the first day of rioting. Soon, bombs exploded, and neighborhoods were overrun. Jessie was just arriving home from picking her sisters up at school when the news broke of the alien invasion, as it was being called. They had watched the news in terror. Their father had called to tell them to barricade the house and to gather as many supplies as they could in case they had to leave in a hurry. They were supposed to go to the cabin up near Wenatchee if it got too bad. That was the last time any of them heard from him. By that night, roaming groups had overturned cars and set fire to homes and businesses throughout the area. Jessie, Jordan, and Taylor had gathered as much as they could and hidden in the old cellar behind the woodpile when rocks and bricks had been thrown through the windows of their home. They had barely made it to safety, climbing from the 2nd-story balcony into the tree that was next to it, as their house was overrun. They had been running and hiding ever since. Jessie stopped to adjust the black scarf she had tied around her nose and mouth. She didn't want there to be any sign of her, including the slight fog of her breath in the freezing air. There was too much riding on her not getting caught, namely Jordan and Taylor, her 17 and 15-year-old sisters. At 22, she was their mom, dad, and protector. Tonight, she had been fortunate to come across a small convoy of Trivators. They had set up a ration station almost 10 blocks away. She had grabbed a box that had been dropped as they unloaded supplies into one of the distribution centers they had set up for the humans like her who refused to trust them. She had found other packages before, and while the food was bland, it was edible. She had disappeared into the dark alley before anyone saw her. Hiding behind an overturned trash bin, she had emptied the small box into her backpack and disappeared. She had been terrified at first she was about to be caught. She had never been so happy about the
Sample complete. Ready to continue?